Oh, you don't hear because nobody, talks about it anymore because it's not new. So yeah, there's a couple of Iris-T batteries. There's a bunch of NASAMS batteries. I forget how many, but there's a number of NASAMS batteries. Let's see if Oryx has a list of how many. I think at least like 4 or so. 8 NASAMS systems have been promised by the US, but not all of them have been delivered yet. So I don't know how many. And then there's some more from Canada and Norway. I don't know how many. I think about 3 or 4 are currently in action, maybe a bit more. There's at least 2 Iris-T batteries, maybe more. There's a bunch of air defense systems. There's Aspida air defense systems. There's there's 2 Patriot batteries in full, one from Germany, one from the US. There's endless quantities clearly not, but there's large quantities of various Soviet-type systems that were given primarily by the likes of Poland, the Czech Republic. Remember those Kube batteries. There's French Crotal. There's several Hawk batteries. Unclear again as to how many. Now there's shorter range stuff like Gepards, like Stormers, like Avengers. There's the one Skyguard and the one Sky Ranger that have been built as demonstration units. Those are there. All manner of things. Patriots you hear more about right now because it's a very different capability that was added to what Ukraine already had. But I mean, why would you hear anything about the NASAMS specifically? Right? You don't generally hear, oh no, this took down this cruise missile and this took down this other cruise missile. Also, Ukrainians aren't going to advertise where they have Iris-Ts, where they have NASAMS, for example. One thing I'm not sure about is whether the Franco-Italian SAMP-T is already in theater and operating or not yet. And maybe that's a little bit of an intentional fog of war.
Yeah, and on that note, so I was sort of thinking about that a bit yesterday. It looks like there's a few things. It looks like the Russians have changed their tactics a bit. So they try and swarm Kiev's air defenses with Shahed and then try and hit military targets with other stuff. I saw a report that 4 or 5 Ukrainian aircraft had been damaged and a runway had been damaged. I haven't been able to follow up on the detail of that, but that looked like the Russians are sort of being vaguely effective with this stuff. Obviously, you don't want Iris-T or Patriots or NASAMS taking down Shaheds. You want the Gepards doing that. I mean, we saw the video of the Gepard firing literally, I think, 2 or 3 rounds and taking down a Shahed. You know, the cost of doing that with something more serious is just prohibitive. And at the same level, I'm sort of thinking in the view, in the context of the sort of change of tactics with the Russians over the last 2-3 days, where they're literally trying a fairly intense round of attacks against Kiev. How long does it take to reload these things? And I think we worked out yesterday that you can reload a Patriot battery in half an hour. If you were really good at it. Otherwise, it would be about an hour.
But that's assuming that you've expended everything a whole battery had, right? So if you imagine,
exactly right, definitely, yeah.
So just to illustrate that a little bit, so a single launcher is going to either have, I think, 4 PAC-2 missiles, or it's going to have, I think, either 6 or maybe more PAC-3 missiles. And you're going to have best part of a dozen launchers in a battery, so 8 to 12, I guess, somewhere in there. So you're looking at, did you really fire 40 interceptors or more, 40, 50, 60 interceptors from this one Patriot battery? And then, how many more from whatever else? Russia doesn't seem to be concentrating that many missiles, or at least thus far they haven't, on Kiev all at the same time for that to really make a difference, even with a single Patriot battery, right? because remember, there's still either an ASAMS or an IRIS-T system there as well, and that has a bunch of AMRAAMs, for example, that can very, very easily take down Russian cruise missiles. So, as a combination of all of that, it's generally kind of quite all right. And you just don't get into that sort of trouble with needing to reload literally everything. Okay, Daniel, I see you as connecting still. If you see yourself as connecting, leave, quit, and come back. If you see yourself, yeah, he saw himself as connecting as well. Okay. Very well. Yeah, sometimes glitches happen. At this point, I'll say about an hour ago, we crashed. So if you'd be so kind as to retweet the space, that'd be greatly appreciated. Yeah, this time it's going to work eventually. But yeah, in short, different things were being used this morning in a strike on Moscow. Let's see what all this leads to. Daniel, I'm going to have you wait for just a little bit longer because on my screen you're still connecting, and that means that I won't be able to hear you. We're just going to wait for just a little bit before we get there. Sorry about that. Sometimes happens, and usually it's fine because usually there's one or two people waiting at that point, and that makes it easier. I would be curious, Ming, if any would try to fly at some airports around Moscow. Remember, about a month ago, there were lots of reports that there's drones in all sorts of places in and around Moscow airports, and then there didn't seem to actually be any. But I'd be very curious to see if any do actually show up there eventually.
Yeah, if there's what was a few weeks ago we had total drone hysteria around airports, where people were, airport workers were instructed to report any suspicious sightings, and literally there were like 2 or 3 every day, and most of which turned out to be false alarms. I haven't seen any of that repeat itself, but obviously airports are very soft targets because your drone doesn't have to have a particularly powerful explosive on it to put an aircraft out of service. I mean, all you need is a tiny puncture hole in the skin, and that's it. If I was Ukrainian, I'd definitely go after Domodedovo or Sheremetyevo. I think both would be, or Pulkovo for that matter too. They'd be absolute choice targets for some kind of drone attack.
Vnukovo or domestic.
Yep. Vnukovo too is another choice target, and Domodedovo.
Finally, I see Daniel is fully connected. Go ahead, Daniel. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. You asked, you talked about the Patriots. You said that they had 6 or more in one battery, and I just wanted to say I saw actually had the privilege to see one of the Swedish Patriot batteries in the celebration of the 500 year of Swedish Army this weekend, and they have 12 actually, so it's quite a many. I was a little bit surprised because I've seen all these with the 4 ones, but these had 12 on them. And
so there's 2 different kinds of PAC-3 interceptors. So there's either 12 or even 16 per. I'm just looking at pictures, so it depends on which ones you have. Yeah, either it's a 3x2. Taking up space of 2 PAC-2 interceptors, or it's a 4x2 taking the space of 2 PAC-2 interceptors.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was just sort of detail. I wanted to add one thing to the drone attacks in Moscow this day. A lot of people are talking about the psychological value and how fantastic it is to sort of stick it up to the Russians, that they finally get to feel what Kiev have been feeling for a long time. And of course, that's not unimportant. I think one big thing is that psychologically for the Russians, they might not feel as invincible anymore. It might start to dawn on them that this is not going well if they haven't figured that out yet. But I think there's some military value to it also, because this will in some way force Russia to act, and they will probably have to move more anti-aircrafts, whatever it is they will have, Panzers or whatever they will put on the roofs, but they will have to put even more of them, if for no other reason than for the looks of it. And they don't have that many left, I guess, so they will have to take them from around Ukraine, which will benefit Ukraine. And there's also one other thing that might actually be a reason, and that is the other day Russia managed to do something militarily competent when it came to all the attacks that they're doing. They actually attacked an airfield and they destroyed some aircrafts, and we discussed it earlier, and it might have been old aircraft maybe being repaired, but having been that for a long time. It could be that way, and it doesn't matter that much, but still it is more militarily competent to do that than attacking cities and trying to terror bomb Ukraine to submission, which doesn't work. And by attacking Moscow, you might trigger the Russians to actually do the stupid thing again and sort of retaliate and stop doing the competent thing. And I think that has a value.
What do we know about, as you said, right? We don't know much about the airfield near Khmelnytsky that got struck by the Russians last week. But I really wonder what the what the BDA there is, because they say 4 or 5 aircraft were damaged. The runway was damaged. What does that mean, right? If a cruise missile hits somewhere, on the runway, and then some shrapnel hit some aircraft that were half a kilometer away, then you can see, okay, there's damage to the aircraft, but it is fixable within a few days or whatever, right? Or for some it is, for some it isn't. Versus it hit right in the middle of 5 aircraft and they're all completely scrapped. There's a big spectrum of outcomes there, which I think is interesting to kind of consider. And seeing that we don't have a whole lot of details of it, we gonna have to guess where on the spectrum that is. They did say that the runway was immediately being repaired, which obviously makes sense, right? Because of course it was. That's the relatively easy one. Aircraft can be more complicated depending on the details there.
Absolutely, and there is more sort of. There are things that Russia could do that would be more competent when it comes militarily, but still, that even if that was not an airfield that was used that much, even if it weren't really usable aircraft, and even if they can fix the runway really fast, I think it sort of shows some kind of competency, at least, apart from so separate that from what they have been doing for quite a long time, because attacking Kiev, the only thing they achieve actually is strengthen the Ukrainian will to fight, and also muster support from the West. So striking airfields is sort of logical, I would say. So I'm happy if they stop doing that.
Absolutely. Apparently, there's another report that says they hit a PLL facility at said airfield, which is another, kind of sensible target, but a lot less movable one than planes, right? So, also then depends on whether they were using information from some sort of a there and then, let's say, traitor or spy or some such, or whether they were just saying, well, we see on radars that planes come from that direction. Let's try that airfield. We haven't tried there for a year or something. So again, a big spectrum of